The Financial Security for All webinars are brought to you by the Financial Security for All community of practice. We are extension educators across the nation who meet together as a group to support each other's work in outreach education and research for that outreach education. And we're delighted to present this webinar to you today. You can view the archived webinars on our YouTube channel or on our webpage, uaex.edu/money, and then look for the resources page for financial educators. All of the archived webinars are there, and this webinar will be archived there as well. I am Dr. Laura Hendricks. I'm an associate professor in personal finance and consumer economics with the University of Arkansas System, Division of Agriculture, Cooperative Extension Service. I am so delighted to welcome Andrew to our financial security webinars today. One of our educators saw his presentation at NEAFCS and thought it would be a perfect fit for our community, and I agree. You know, we've talked about how financial education can sometimes be a hard sell, and it can be difficult to get an audience for people to come to traditional outreach education meetings. And so Andrew has been really innovative in looking for ways to draw an audience and to engage people in personal finance education, one of those being escape rooms. Andrew Bingham is an extension educator in family and consumer sciences and financial management at the University of Idaho Extension. Andrew has an MS degree from University of Utah and BS degree from Brigham Young University, Idaho. And he's based in Ada County. He works with community partners to provide financial literacy programs to individuals in need. He is chair of UI Extension Ada County, and he is the only extension educator in the area with a focus on financial management in the Southern Idaho area. He serves a wide variety of types of communities, organizations, and individuals with financial education programming. He admits to being fascinated with finance and enjoys research and sharing all topics pertaining to it. He's an Idaho native, and he's happy making his career there, where he's helping the communities that he grew up in and around. And he's also very happy to establish his home there, and he and his wife are raising their two children in that same Idaho environment that was his home place and stomping grounds. So thank you so much for being with us today. And our attendees, join me, Andrew, in welcoming you to the Financial Security for All webinars.
So thank you, everyone, for attending. It's still morning here in Idaho. Anything before the PM is morning to me, so I'm counting it. So today's presentation I've titled Escape the Ordinary, and for those of you who might have seen this at NEFCS or somewhere else, I slightly changed the subtitle to make it a broader, from top-down view, to educating through innovation, not just necessarily the escape room method. I am interested in expanding beyond this, so I came up with some ideas and ways that we can discuss that. But as with any presentation, it's important to know where we're going before we start off. So we'll be going through introductions, myself primarily, talking about the needs and problems for financial education. Of course, I'm talking about my escape room, 5 quick parts to that, and then just talking about how we can innovate with financial literacy and financial literacy programs. And then, of course, I want to save time at the end for questions. I think that's going to be the most important part of today. So if I go through this quickly, I apologize, but I do it for our best interest, where we can get to the end and have enough time to really engage in a dialogue that I think will be way more effective than you just listening to me. So on to me. This is me. This is my family, actually. This is how I like to introduce myself, because my family just always makes me look better. I really don't mind that this picture, you can't see my face. I think that actually makes it even better still. Not only that, but this is the profile picture that the university took of me when I first came on. And it's not like you can really see my face very well in that picture either. So I just assumed go with my family. Laura mentioned that we're raising 2 kids. She must have pulled that from my bio on the University of Idaho website. Since then, we've added a third. He's our little pandemic baby. He was born March 21st. I barely got into the hospital and barely got the ability to stay there. 2 days after we left, or actually after he was born, he was a little bit early and came in extremely fast. So he spent a day or two in the NICU. But after that, after his first 2 days there, they stopped letting dad stay the night there. So he's been a great baby, though, super happy, and a light in these dark times for us, for sure. So like I mentioned, Laura pretty much told you all these things about me, where my degrees are from. I will say that we love Idaho. We went to graduate school in Utah, and that was cool, but we did not want to live there. So we moved back as soon as we could. And I thought I'd go into corporate finance. That's why I mastered in finance. I was going to make lots of money, right? But I was in graduate school where I learned that I didn't really want to work with those people my whole career. And I kind of toyed with the idea of teaching, but it was kind of a lot of hoops to jump through to get to that point. And then lo and behold, this opportunity came along. It wasn't, as technical as becoming a high school teacher, and it required a master's, and it worked out really well because it's awesome. I really enjoy spreadsheets and I enjoy finance, and I get to do those things every day as much as I want for my career. And then what comes natural when you really enjoy what you're doing, what you're learning? Well, teaching. That comes very natural. But outside of finance, I enjoy football. So if you have an interest in spreadsheets, finance, if you want to, a shoulder to cry in because the market's down 2% today and you want to talk about that, I'm more than happy to do that. Or if you just want to talk about football, I'm a friend right away. All right, so that's me. I wanted to dive into the financial education needs. So in 2017, Champlain College came out with a report card for all 50 states and how they do in regards to their financial literacy. Now they took their methodology from, largely based on high school curriculum, maybe a few other quizzes here and there, but for the most part, this is based on high school curriculum. And almost half the states in the country rate at an A or B. I will be quick to point out that Idaho is, gets a B grade right there. Maybe you can find your state somewhere on there and feel proud or ashamed, whatever it might be. But before you start feeling strong emotions either way, I will point out, and they said this in their report card, the center estimates that half of grade B states allocate less than 1/4 of a half-year course in high school to personal finance topics. This means that students in 8 of these grade B states receive between 7 and 13 hours of personal finance instruction in all of high school. So 7 to 13 hours of personal finance instruction is good enough to get you a B. I think that's more than a little generous, but what's more concerning than that is, what about C, D, and F? I mean, if 7 to 13 hours of personal finance instruction gets a B grade, then the other half of the country, it must be pretty abysmal, right? So I think that's more telling, not to like the success of Idaho. I think it's more telling to the need for financial education in the US. Now, this is 2017. There's actually a website. It's called vision2020reportcard.org. And it's a nonprofit organization that has actually done essentially the same thing, but with more interactive graphics. I encourage you to check that out. And if somebody reminds me at the end of this, I'd be more than happy to put that in the chat box. But they do the same thing. They grade all 50 states and allow you to click on the state to see why they receive that grade and what they can do better. I will say in that one, Idaho got downgraded from a B to a C, which is honestly probably more fitting because we have one economics course and I literally learned nothing about personal finance in it, or economics for that matter. I guess why I majored in it. I will say that Missouri, Utah, and Virginia, you have something to be proud of because you consistently get A's. All right, so there's a need. Now, what's the problem, right? Well, we're financial educators. We work in the finance field. We try and teach people about this very, very important topic. So I'm interested, this is one of the interactive parts. What's your biggest challenge as a finance educator? So just answer that question in the chat and I'll pull it up here and see what everyone has to say. What is your biggest challenge as a finance educator?
Oh, I see getting an audience, Andrew. We talked about that earlier, getting people to attend programs. Time, we're spread so thin across many areas. So our county educators are doing nutrition and family life and health, as well as financial education. Switching to online education with youth, and then having many different platforms. So not everyone uses Zoom. Content, Mary said, can be a tad dry, written top down, like for bankers. People are reluctant to discuss. Sometimes it's hard to get into schools. Thanks, Jean. Emily said, getting students interested and seeing the value of financial education. Many people wanting advice on things out of my scope of knowledge or that is not appropriate for me to answer. I think that I experienced that when I was new to financial education too. I would go to do a program on maybe how to do a spending plan, and someone in the audience would want me to give them investment advice. So they were looking for a quick way to make more money. So ways to respond, that can be a challenge. Or they might ask you something about taxes when you're talking about credit management. It's such a broad area. Yeah. People feel afraid to teach the topic. So I think there is that. We do tend to do a lot of training in nutrition in traditional extension circles, and really need that support for financial education as well.
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir here. Like I said, I'm the only financial educator in my area. There's 123 extension educators or researchers in University of Idaho Extension System. There's only 3 of us out of all that will specialize in finance. I guess 4 if you count our state specialists. So I get it. Kind of feel like the neglected child there, but I guess that just makes our jobs even more important, right? So great list. That was awesome interaction. I'm going to see how many of these I actually got. Let me make sure I'm back. Okay, we're back on the PowerPoint. So attracting an audience, holding their attention, a constantly changing topic. I think this is interesting because, you know, here in Idaho, we have a ton of ag educators, but how often does their field change? I mean, plants grow the way they've always grown. They might learn a little bit more here and there, but with finance, like everything is constantly changing, and let alone, you know, inflation at 2%, monetary policy is always changing. What's the Federal Reserve going to do? What about administrations? And here within the next month, we will see some major changes one way or the other, no matter how the election goes. So yes, lots of changing in our field. Tracking behavior change, I don't think that's unique to any extension educator. Motivating clientele and then changing people's lives. That's what we're always trying to do, right? Well, in terms of educator problems, I'm just going to cross off constantly changing topic. That's never going to change. And if you're not up to the task of handling that, then I apologize. But maybe you might not want to be in teaching, might not want to teach finance if that's the case. And then I'm also just going to cross out tracking behavior change because I don't know the secret to that. And that's a discussion for another time. Very important, but can't help you there. And motivating clientele and changing people's lives, I feel like that just goes back to attracting an audience and holding their attention, because if they show up and if they listen and if what you have to tell them is worth listening to, then yeah, it's going to motivate them and it's going to ultimately change their lives. So what that boils down to is, why won't people take a stronger interest in their family and personal finances? So what's the problem with financial educators? What's our struggle? Well, why aren't there people with a stronger interest in their finances? Well, it's dry and boring. I mean, it's not a coincidence that they picked an economics class to turn into a really boring subject for Ferris Bueller's Day Off. In fact, Ben Stein has made a career of being boring. An economist is famous for being boring. So famous that Dry Eyes, Clear Eyes, has literally employed him for, I don't know how long, decades, it looks like, if you're looking at these pictures. So yeah, it's dry and boring. In fact, was it Mary who said that finance is dry? And yeah, that's the perception, unfortunately. Maybe they think it's too stressful or complicated. Somebody earlier mentioned that they're afraid to teach it. Maybe we as educators ourselves are afraid it's too complicated, and some aspects might be. It's not convenient enough. Sometimes our stakeholders or clientele aren't willing to meet us halfway even. They expect us to meet them where they're at. Too much competition, so we heard that too. A lot of educators are spread thin, especially if you're not specializing in finance, right? And then, not to sound too crass, but just ignorance. Maybe people have no idea how much trouble they're in until they're really up against it, right? And so they don't even understand how bad they need this information. So, on my first day on the job, if you remember your first day on the job, maybe you can relate to this. I had no idea what I was doing. I came into my office. I struggled to use the phone. Apparently, the county 2 counties over is a long distance phone call. I had a desk. I'm about 6'5", and I kid you not, I had this heavy metal desk, must have weighed 2 tons, but somehow only stood like 2 feet off the ground. I couldn't fit under it. And I was lost. But one thing I did understand is that no one really cared about finance as much as I did. And because of that, it would be difficult to draw an audience. And so I decided, rather than try and do it myself, which, before we really even started, I had mentors tell me, find partners and have them help you do that. That's what I would do. I would find partners and they would help me promote programs. And so what I did is I emailed every library in my district or my county. And I think I heard back from 3 of them, and I met with 2 of them. And I sat down with one of them, and he said, well, we've been doing escape rooms in our library. They're really successful. Maybe we could do a finance one. And that was like a light bulb moment. I mean, I wish I could take credit that it was like my own idea, but really somebody threw it out there and I took it and ran with it. And they ran with me because what ended up happening is we partnered up with this library, not just to put it on, but to develop the program altogether. One of the very first things we did is we went through an escape room as a team. I'd never been through an escape room before, and it was a ton of fun. I like to use this picture when I'm telling people how awesome my job is because I got paid to do an escape room. How many people can say that? So we went through escape room, and then over about a 6 to 7 month period, we had meetings after meetings after meetings, and it was a long process to figure this out. We had notes, whiteboards, discussing layout. We bought a lot of stuff on Amazon and tested it out. We laid out the room, see what it looked like, test more stuff out, and we probably didn't use about 10 to 20% of the stuff we purchased on Amazon. And then we pilot tested it. And I know this screen, this slide here looks kind of messy, but honestly, it kind of was. It was intentional. But after about 6 or 7 months, we got it worked out. And the product ended up looking like this. We had a theme for it. The nice thing about partnering with libraries is they have their pulse on what's popular, and they happen to know at the time that Ready Player One was a book that was on back order, it was a movie that was back order quite a while, and that it would be a popular theme. So we went with this Ready Player One, and we don't really advertise it as Ready Player One, we call it futuristic. So that was the theme. We had objectives. We wanted to teach in this escape room saving, budgeting, and investing. I will say that during the development, there's this, I don't want to call it an argument, but a pretty passionate discussion, whether we should identify the theme first or the objectives first. And the truth is we never really settled on that, and things just kind of happened organically. And I couldn't tell you which one you should do first yourselves if you decide to try and create your own. We decided our audience would be families. And I came to this conclusion because at this point, I'd been getting into junior highs quite a bit. Large part of my reporting numbers come from classes in junior highs. But I go in and I have 45 minutes with the class, and sometimes I teach, back-to-back days. So I get grand total of an hour and a half with these kids. And a lot of them are in lower income areas. A lot of them are hearing this stuff for the first time, and a lot of them aren't seeing this stuff practiced very well at home. And so I realized then and there that my hour and a half is not going to be enough with them if they're going home and they're spending, 24 hours a day with parents that aren't practicing good financial habits. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to make it all inclusive for families, so they could come in, so they could learn together, but more importantly, so they can start talking more openly about finance within their own homes. So duration was 45 minutes. So they had 45 minutes to escape this escape room, and then we'd have a 15-minute debrief. I will say we didn't market this as a financial escape room. We just call it an escape room. Because truth be told, we thought if we told them as a financial escape room, it would become less appealing and they might not show up. So during that 15-minute debrief, we'd come in like, surprise, you learned about finance. Can you guess where at? And then we'd talk about it. We'd also use the 15 minutes for one of the library partners to reset the room for the next team to go through it. And the 15 minutes also included an evaluation for them to fill out. So the budget, we'd actually received some internal funding to the tune of $3,750. Don't worry, that is not the cost to put on the escape room. That's the cost that we use to figure things out and to build 2 transportable kits. In fact, I don't know if you can, probably can't see, I have a tote back there against my wall. It's about a 40-gallon tote. We put everything you need in that tote, and then you can just transport it to a room, set it up, put it on, tear it down, goes on to the next location. So we have 2 of those with that budget. I'm sure somebody's going to ask, if you're not already wondering, how much does it cost to put on these escape rooms? How much would it cost to build one of these kits? I've been saying $1,000, but as I think about it, I think it could be cut down to significantly less than that. One of the aspects of the kit is a tablet. Initially, we had iPads, which are high end, but that was a mistake because they're almost too secure. So we've went with some alternative $100 tablets that work just fine. So yeah, lots of ways to cut back on that to make it more affordable. And if I was to ballpark it, I would say $500 to $600 per kit. Another large expense with that is we use a high-end baby monitor, which I know sounds really funny. We tried using webcams and stuff, but ultimately we didn't want to have to go into new locations, tinker with the Wi-Fi, and rely on that. So we found that a baby monitor did just as well, if not better, because it was just super simple. And it makes things more appealing and user-friendly for those rural partners as well. So why does working with libraries work? Why did it go so well for us? Well, libraries are a staple in every community. And this is something that I did talk about the NEFCS PowerPoint because I just find it fun and kind of humorous because I get to talk a little bit more about Idaho. But this here is Bruno, Idaho. Population of, I don't even know, I'm pretty sure less than 200. No one really lives there. In fact, it's not even a city. It's an unincorporated town. That means they don't have a governing body, right? If you look up there to the northeast, that's desert, like not just sagebrush and, type that you'd picture with, your US desert. That's like sand dune type desert, your cartoon type desert, really. They have dirt, farm fields, and very few people. And then again, no governing body. Yet they do have a library. Again, no governing body, but they have a library. So every community, can't stress that enough. They are resourceful. So I talked about how they had success with their escape rooms in the past. They had done that on like an $80 budget, right? So they can do things on a shoestring budget, as they called it, because they are really resourceful. Libraries have a pulse on the community. I always like to think of extension as like we're specialists, and maybe in a military sense, like we're special ops. We have our area of expertise. We're like, 2 inches wide, but like a mile deep. And libraries are a mile wide and 2 inches deep. They just have a feel for everything. And it's a good partnership that we can come in and dive deeper into a specific area if they can identify it has a need area. Again, going back to what I just said, that we are about 2 inches wide and a mile deep. Going broad with and bringing in partnerships, expert partnerships, I have always found to be an excellent route to go. And then extension has resources. So going back to what the library was doing with $80, you can imagine how happy they were when we brought in nearly $4,000, right? So we used our resources, we used their resourcefulness and developed this great program. So we did run it quite a bit before the pandemic hit, and we had evaluations that we had them fill out. And what we were looking for in those evaluations is that we wanted to confirm that education through an escape room was an effective form of outreach, that it was an effective medium for teaching, and then obviously we wanted to collect the data for those 2 points and create some scholarly publications. What we ended up finding is that escape rooms are fun activity for nearly everyone. I say nearly everyone because there were a few, not a few, there's one evaluation that came back that was actually, I won't say negative. Of all the evaluations we got, there's only one person who scored it on a less than a 7 on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of enjoyability. And that individual went in with her son and another family that she did not know, and the other family just tended to dominate the whole experience and kind of shut the other kid out to the point where he had a blow up in the escape room, kind of awkward to watch, and just ultimately wasn't enjoyable for them. There's also one group of like 10-year-olds, and that didn't go extremely well. I don't know if the mom, like the one mom, is like one mom and then 10-year-olds. I don't know if she filled out an evaluation, but she didn't look like she had a terribly great time. So we definitely learned that there's a good ratio. It's not 10 kids to 1 adult. It's probably 1 kid to 1 adult, 2 kids to 1 adult maximum. We did learn that the evaluation needs to be restructured because ultimately we didn't see evidence of them learning a lot of financial aspects to it. Now that could be because we were going very, very general. It was a Likert scale retrospective post evaluation. So we give it to them afterwards and we ask them, like, before this, did you know the importance of saving? 1 to 3. And nobody's going to say like, yeah, I didn't think saving was important before this and now I do. We probably need to dive down and get a little more specific. And honestly, it might not be the best setting to give it to them right after the escape room, where it was hands-on activity. They had fun, they're engaged, they may be, high energy after that. And then we tell them, here's a clipboard, good luck finding a place to sit down and fill it out. But we did learn that was an excellent team building exercise if approached correctly. Again, I think the key to the correct approach is just the right ratio. And then the buy-in from the community partners has just been substantial. Librarians love this idea. They're lining up to host it left and right. And I'll show you that a little bit more. We've had some interest, actual credit unions reaching out to us rather than us reaching out to them. So tons of interest there. But I wanted to go back to, more so the qualitative, maybe talk a little bit to the right ratio here. This was my favorite group by far. It was the parents here. I don't know if it's aunt and uncle or friends or what, and then this kid. But this team rocked it. It was funny because they got through it in like 38 minutes, 39 minutes, and we came in and then they're like, we are the slowest group, weren't we? I'm like, no, you guys were far and away the fastest. But more impressive than their time was the kid. And he's probably 8, 9 years old, but like he contributed in meaningful ways. So much so that at the end, his dad was just singing his praises left and right. He said, good job, buddy. We'd never made it through that without you. And he's probably right. And like, to me, that was the moment where things clicked. And I thought, yes, this program, it works. It builds those family relationships. They're going to talk more about finance at home. This kid's going to look back on this positive experience and know that he can help his family with just about anything. And maybe they bring it up in the future. We did have one evaluation where one of the qualitative responses was, I need to talk about this more with my family. And that's kind of the great thing about finance, right? It's kind of a shotgun effect. But because of the compounding nature of finance, if you can just reach one family and they do things differently, and maybe it's, a couple $100 the first year, but that compounds into hundreds in the next, thousands, and then tens of thousands over the course of their lifetime and into the generations that follow. And so that's that's the best part about our job is we don't need to bat 100%. In fact, even if we bat 1%, that 1% changes the way they do things forever, then it's time well spent. But we'll go ahead and move on. So the future, I mean, it's hard to know what the future holds. So after COVID, I definitely have plans for this. During COVID, it's a little bit difficult because it does rely on in-person interaction, right? So we did have a Teach the Teacher training, a curriculum where we would train librarians to host this at their own locations, and then they could take it and they could do it themselves, collect evaluations. And then once they're done with it, they'd go on to the next library. So we were going to disseminate it across the state using that system. In fact, we had it scheduled, we had an agenda, and then 4 days before it was supposed to happen, that's when our governor issued the order to close everything down. So this is actually all the locations that were going to come. We had, I believe, 12 different libraries, or 11 different libraries, library districts with 12 different librarians. But I want to point out, down here in South Central Idaho, those 2 dots, those people were willing to travel about 2 to 3 hours to come to this. I will say that we had plans to hold it in South Central and East Idaho and eventually make it up to North sometime in 2021 before the pandemic. We didn't really clarify that, so we had people from Central Idaho willing to drive 2 to 3 hours to attend this training just for the opportunity to take this program back to their community. More impressive than that is way up north in Sandpoint, Idaho, that librarian was willing to travel 9 hours to attend this training just for this opportunity. So when I say the buy-in was there, like hook, line, and sinker, it was there. We didn't really even push this. I think we put it out like 1 email, and then we had 12 responses, and we said, yeah, we don't really need to pursue this any further. I do want to share it across state borders. Honestly, that might happen faster than I anticipated because of the NEFCS presentation. After that, which was a super well attended presentation, way better than I actually anticipated. After that, I received 40 emails, 40 different contacts of people interested in this from all these land-grant universities who are interested in either attending a virtual training or eventually hosting this in their own county or state. So sharing across state borders means, I will share the material that I have. We have a manual, a list of items, provide that virtual training. If you're on my list and you're attending this because you're wondering why I haven't emailed you, I apologize. It's reporting season, plus I had third-year review, but that's probably not a good enough excuse still. Provide certain props. Some of these props are printed with a 3D printer. I had startup funds, and that's how I justified buying a 3D printer, is that I need this for my escape room program. So we'll provide those. And then train in your county. I'd love to just train in person and be there with you. Maybe it's because I'm just lacking human interaction like all of us are. Maybe it's because I just want to go down south. A lot of the feedback I got was from Arkansas, Georgia, and Texas. And I lived in Texas for 2 years, and I do have a passion for the state and for that part of the country, in no small part because of Bluebell. So I'd love to come down, visit, get things going, and then consume as much Bluebell as humanly possible, and as much time, as little time constraint as I can. So that's the escape room. And then this is kind of where I step back and I wanted to talk about innovation as a whole, not just exclusively my escape room. And so I've done a lot of pondering on this because I have found that the more I deal with my escape room and then those innovative programs, the less I want to do things the normal way, right? And when I say normal way, I mean like, here's your PowerPoint presentation, here's the information, kind of the dry top-down reading that was one of the problems mentioned earlier. And I've really been thinking about it a lot lately because my predecessor asked for a binder of one of his previous programs, and I'd never touched it before, but I found it in the office, and it was like a 10-part series, and I'm sure it's great material, but truthfully, I wouldn't want to sit through it, and I wouldn't want to teach it. And maybe in 10 years ago, things were different, but I believe more than ever, we have to adapt, we have to change, and especially in this subject that doesn't get the attention that it deserves. So I've come up with a few questions to innovate, to make our financial programming more effective, at least in my opinion. Now, there's no research behind these. This is just my philosophy and pondering. But if we can answer affirmative in at least some of these questions, not necessarily all of them, I think we're on the right path. So first, do you enjoy developing the program? Now, we're financial educators. We are like 99th percentile for finance love, right? Like nobody really enjoys it more than us. So if we're not enjoying making our own program, what are we doing? If we don't enjoy making our own programs, how do we expect our stakeholders or our clientele to enjoy listening to it, right? So it should be fun. If you're not having fun in your job as an extension educator, then you're doing something wrong. And it might not necessarily be fun. It doesn't have to be interactive and engaging, but it does at very least have to be interesting. So I do a Social Security program, and I'm a big enough nerd where I found that interesting. And it's worked out pretty well in terms of attendance. I will say, again, I'm not doing a ton with the escape room right now because I'm fairly limited. So I'm chasing other avenues of fun and interesting stuff. And so I'm using my 3D printer to create new programming, which I find really enjoyable, which I find interesting and fun. Right now, I'm creating a faux currency where we can set up a almost like an allowance system in homes where we could just hand this off to parents and tell them to reward their kids for positive behavior, because there's a lot of research that shows that reinforcing positive behavior is more effective than punishing for negative behavior. So they learn good behavior. They also learn financial behavior. They can take that currency and maybe the parents set up a system where they get more screen time for however many iBucks, or they can also turn it into an extension office or a library for little 3D printed trinkets. Fun and interesting. I call them iBucks. I got them here too. They're, again, a lot of fun. I was thinking we could do it at the University of Arkansas, and we could call them Razorbucks because you get it. Razorbacks is their mascot. How quickly can they find that information on their phone? Okay, so if they are interested enough to learn it, where are they going to go to first? Are they going to go to you first, or are they going to look it up on their smartphone? Because everyone has a smartphone, right? So that means the stuff that you're teaching has to be something that is complex enough for you to digest for them. Again, I go back to the Social Security example because it's complicated. Even I have to read those things 3 or 4 times. And then is there a lot of misleading information on the subject? Is that where unbiased, research-based program needs to come in and save them? What comes to mind is, credit cards. People treat them as if they're really, really, really bad, and they can be if you have no self-discipline, but they can also be really good, from building your credit score to earning some perks. Is the topic relevant? Now, what do I mean by relevant? I mean, how big is the audience? Is it going to apply to a large enough audience to make it worthwhile? And does that audience see the need? We were talking a little bit before this started, but I feel like a good example of this would be investing for millennials. There's a lot of programs out there, Robinhood being the primary one, where millennials are investing for free because they can do that now. But are they doing it correctly? How much do they know about it? There's a big audience because millennial is the largest demographic, age demographic in the country now. And do they see a need? Maybe. Maybe they don't see it, but if we can market correctly, then they could see the need. If nothing else, we know there's a need. I don't know if you heard about the young man in Michigan who unfortunately killed himself because he racked up a $750,000 deficit on Robinhood and just didn't understand what he was doing. Not entirely sure if he understood what that $750,000 meant. I'm interested in how we can collaborate, you and I, and then what ways we can share resources, because we can talk about this and we can have good intentions, but until we reach out to each other, until we can actually figure out a method in which we share and develop things together in an effective way, is anything really going to change? And then I tend to think not. So I would love to hear from individuals now, and emails and phone calls. If you have ideas, if you have a way to create a network where we can all share ideas, post them to a board, post our resources to the board, love to hear it.